This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good afternoon. Today we will be discussing about four small topics. One is nocturnal enuresis. Second one is pica. Third one is temper tantrums. Fourth one is breath holding spells. Okay. Enuresis. Nocturnal enuresis. Okay, enuresis is derived from a Greek word enurion, that means to void urine. Definition is involuntary voiding of urine at least 2 nights per month beyond the age of 5 years, by which bladder control is normally obtained and without any congenital or acquired defects of the urinary tract. So there should be involuntary voiding of urine after that is at least 2 nights per month and beyond 5 years. So by that time actually bladder control should be obtained unless there are some congenital malformations or acquired defects of the urinary tract. Okay. So development of urinary control. Initially, bowel control will always be earlier than bladder control. So first we will get nocturnal bowel control, followed by daytime bowel control, followed by daytime voiding urinary control and nighttime urinary control. So this is the maximum by 5 years. So daytime voiding control will be attained in 90 to 95% of children by 5 years of age. And nighttime voiding control will be obtained by 80 to 85% by 5 years of age. So only 0.5 to 1% will have no control at adolescence. So based on diagnostics and statistical manual 5 criteria for enuresis, repeated voiding of urine into bed or clothes, whether voluntary or intentional, involuntary or intentional, the behavior either occurs at least twice a week for at least 3 consecutive months, results in clinically significant distress or social, functional, or academic impairment. So the behavior occurs in a child who is at least 5-year-old or has reached the equivalent developmental level. So by 5 years of age, the child should be attaining bladder control, or by 5 years of developmental age, he should be attaining this milestone. If the if your enuresis is occurring at least twice a week for at least 3 months and it is causing significant impairment, social, functional, or academic impairment, then it should be addressed immediately. So the behavior cannot be attributed to physiologic effects of substance or the other medical condition. So okay. So enuresis is classified as primary, secondary. Primary, child who never gained nocturnal voluntary control. In 85% of the case, it is primary only. Secondary is at least 6-month period of dryness has preceded the onset of wetting. So previously the child became dry, but now newly the child started again having nighttime nocturnal enuresis. This is called a secondary. There are some other reasons for secondary enuresis. So classification of enuresis as per International Children Continence Society, nocturnal enuresis dividing into primary and secondary. In primary, no daytime bladder dysfunction is there. Then primary monosymptomatic nocturnal enuresis, and other type is primary non-monosymptomatic nocturnal enuresis. If it in secondary with daytime bladder dysfunction, we'll be classifying it into secondary monosymptomatic nocturnal enuresis and secondary non-monosymptomatic nocturnal enuresis. Primary enuresis, main cause is genetics and familial pattern. Risk of enuresis is 7.5 times higher when a father was enuretic than one mother was. So 75% risk if both parents were enuretic, 45% risk, the higher risk if in families with one parent enuretic, and 15% when neither parent were enuretic. 68% concordance rate in monozygotic twins and 38% concordance rate in dizygotic twins. Genes on chromosome 22 are implicated. We don't know exactly. So mechanisms, probably some abnormal bladder dysfunction, hyposecretion of arginine vasopressin, hormone or diminished capacity to be aroused from bladder from sleep. So secondary enuresis, psychosocial issues like child insecure after birth of younger sibling, family quarrels, academic stress like school failure, does not like classroom, teacher, etc. And urinary tract infection is one of the important causes of secondary enuresis. Juvenile diabetes mellitus, constipation, neurogenic bladder, sleep disordered breathing, urethral obstruction, major motor seizure, and ectopic ureter. Management of secondary enuresis depends on the cause, but primary enuresis is mainly familial and genetical factors are involved. Nocturnal enuresis pathogenesis, delayed maturation of cortical mechanisms that allow voluntary control of micturition. Sleep control, sleep disorder, enuretic children. Enuresis can occur in any stage of sleep. Reduced antidiuretic hormone production at night. Genetic factors chromosome 12 and 13q likely sites of defect. So complete history evaluation involves complete history, development history, and family history. Complete history of primary or secondary nocturnal enuresis we should ascertain. Nocturnal or diurnal. Does encopresis means passes of stools are also associated or not. Associated urinary tract symptoms like dysuria, polyuria, pollakiuria, hematuria, pyuria is associated or not, we should look into. Developmental history wise, birth history, achievement of milestones, neurological deficits, and CNS disorders we should be thinking of. Okay. Family history wise, history of enuresis is in parents, traumatic incidents, and parental harmony. Physical examination, visualization of urinary system, abdomen examination for renal or bladder masses, genitals, hypospadias. The opening could be on the lower side. We should look for hypospadias. Neurological, peripheral reflexes, perianal sensations, tone, gait in neurological conditions. And lower back, tuft of hair, and vertebral anomalies should be looked for, because there can be some subtle neurological abnormalities like spina bifida, which we may not see with our naked eye. So therapeutic responses, we should be classifying into initial success, lack of success, continued success, complete success, and relapse. So initial success, 14 consecutive dry nights have been achieved with treatment. Lack of success, failure to meet the above criteria. Continued success, there is no relapse after 6 months of initial success is called as continued success. Complete success means there has been no relapse in 2 years after initial success. Relapse is when 2 or more wet nights within 2 weeks of initial success and the interval between the initial success and relapse is measured. So enuresis management involves, generally we should not be giving excessive fluid to the child before bed. Empty bladder at a bedtime, told to wake up at night and use toilet to remain dry, like at midnight 12 o'clock we should wake up the child for toilet. Improve access to toilet, include the child in morning cleaning up of urine soiled clothes. Behavioral intervention like active participation and commitment of parents, the child, and the pediatrician. So parents counsel to encourage child to win cooperation, never humiliate or punish a child. For this, ensure child doesn't drink fluid after 7 p.m., sleeps by 10 p.m. after voiding urine, wake up the child at 12 midnight to void urine. Reward the child for every dry night. Enuresis subsides in a few months. Motivation therapy. Convince parents that child wants to be dry. Child is encouraged to assume responsibility for his enuresis and actively participate in the treatment. Move from blame for wet nights to praise for dry nights. We should always praise the child for dry nights rather than blaming him for wet nights. A dry morning should receive positive recognition, always. Should receive lavish words of praise. A major breakthrough may warrant material reward. And next one is alarm therapy. Alarm therapy is highly successful, but relapse rate is high, 30%. Alarm triggered when diaper gets wet to awaken the child from the sleep and stop micturition. The sensor will be placed in the underwear of the child, so that when child starts passing urine, this alarm will sense it and immediately wakes up the child by giving an alarm. By repetitive inhibition of micturition, a conditioning reflex occurs ultimately. Within 3 months of treatment, 92% of children gets cured, but relapse rate is high with 30% relapse. Response to retreatment is good. Adjuvant pharmacotherapy like oxybutynin and these tablets and SSRIs may help in improving the outcome. So if you see, this is the alarm. Inside the underwear, the sensor is kept. Whenever it passes urine, it starts sensing and gives an alarm. Wake up, it will say. Okay, gives an alarm. So that child will wake up and stop micturating. Bladder stretching exercise should be advised. Increase oral fluid, lengthening of period between daytime voiding, holding back urination until the point of incontinence can help increase anatomical and bladder functional capacity. Pharmacotherapy with des-amino 8 arginine vasopressin DDAVP for more than 4-year-old child reduces nocturnal urine output to a volume lower than functional bladder capacity, useful in those who do not manifest diurnal rhythm of vasopressin. Dose is 20 microgram, that is one spray in each nostril, like a spray. The maximum up to 80 micrograms. Adverse effects of dilutional hyponatremia, disorientation, seizures, and coma. And pharmacotherapy anticholinergics, oxybutynin chloride acts by increasing bladder capacity and reducing frequency of detrusor contractions. Dose is for more than 7-year-old childs, 5 milligram 2 to 3 times a day. Adverse effects include dryness of mouth, blurring of vision, and facial flushing. Pharmacotherapy includes anticholinergics like tolterodine, a competitive muscarinic receptor antagonist for active bladder. It is selectively for urinary bladder over salivary glands. Used in patients likely to have small functional bladder capacity, either only at night or throughout the day. Pharmacotherapy, another one is tricyclic antidepressants, imipramine, alteration of sleep mechanisms and arousal pattern, cholinergic properties. Dose is 25 milligram for 6 to 8-year-old and 5 to 75 milligram, so 50 to 75 milligram for older children. Administered at 6 p.m. daily. Treatment for 3 to 6 months, then tapered off. Antidote for this medication is physostigmine if adverse effects occurs. Adverse effects include anxiety, insomnia, dry mouth, nausea, personality changes, cardiac arrhythmias, hypotension, respiratory complication, convulsions. Concluding, enuresis is basically a symptom and not a disease state. Okay, that to primary enuresis. Intervention is justified for physiological benefit of child and family. Problem of enuresis should be solved with 5P algorithm, that is praise, patience, perseverance, passion, and positive attitude. Okay. Am I audible? CR?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Screen is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll start with the case scenario. A 5-year-old girl presented with history of abdominal pain and distension. Examination shows long pink and round worms in the stool. Blood count shows eosinophilia. Her mother told she had a habit of eating soil. What is your diagnosis? How will you treat the patient? So this child is having nothing but pica, Ascaris lumbricoid infection due to pica. Okay, this is a parasitic infestation. Treatment include mebendazole 100 milligram twice daily for 3 days, or pyrantel palmate 10 milligram per kg single dose, or albendazole 200 to 400 milligram as a single dose, or piperazine, and counseling is required. So pica involves the persistent eating of non-nutritive substances, example plaster, charcoal, clay, wool, ashes, paint, earth for a period of at least 1 month at an age in which this behavior is developmentally inappropriate. That is, more than 18 to 24 months, the child should not keep all these things in mouth. The eating behavior is inappropriate to the development level. Example, the normal mouthing and tasting of objects in infants and toddlers are not part of culturally sanctioned practice. Pica has been shown to be a predisposing factor in accidental ingestion of poisons, particularly in lead poisoning or hyperkalemia, following ingestion of burnt match heads. In particular, geophagia, soil or clay ingestion has been associated with soil-borne parasitic infestations such as toxoplasmosis and toxocarias. Although firm empirical data supporting any of the nutritional deficiency etiology hypotheses are absent, deficiencies in iron, calcium, zinc, and other nutrients like thiamine, niacin, and vitamin C and D has been associated with pica. So there is no actually confirmed theory that these are causing the problem, but there are many empirical data showing these iron, calcium, zinc, and other nutrients has been associated with pica. So maternal deprivation, paternal separation, parental separation, and paternal neglect, child abuse, and insufficient amount of parent-child interactions has been associated with pica. The ingestion of paint is the most common in children from low socioeconomic families and is associated with lack of parental supervision. Pica may be a serious behavioral problem because it can result in significant medical complication. Malnutrition and hunger may also result in pica. Pica appears to be more common in children with mental retardation, pervasive developmental disorders. Example, Klein-Levin syndrome, schizophrenia. Geophagia, that is eating earth, is associated with pregnancy and not seen as abnormal in some cultures. Children with pica are at increased risk for lead poisoning because they eat paint and all these things, and iron deficiency anemia due to parasitic infestation, anemia, dental injury, and parasitic infections. It usually remits in childhood but can continue into adolescence and adulthood also sometimes. Etiology, numerous etiologies has been proposed but not proven, ranging from psychosocial causes to physical ones. They include nutritional deficiencies like iron, zinc, and calcium, low socioeconomic factors like example lead paint ingestion and child abuse and neglect, family disorganization, psychopathy, learned behavior, underlying biochemical disorders, and culture and family factors. Clinical features include physical findings associated with pica are extremely variable and are relatively related directly to the materials ingested and subsequent medical consequences. So, infections and parasitic infestations are common. Toxocariasis and ascariasis are the commonest soil-borne parasitic infection associated with pica. Okay. So lead poisoning features like vision blindness, parts of visual field defect, hallucinations, and hearing loss, central nervous system problems like insomnia, loss of appetite, decreased libido, depression, and irritability, cognitive defects, memory loss, headache, and personality changes and delirium, mouth, unusual taste, slurred speech, blue line along the gum. And usually in children present with neurological problem, okay, irritability, lethargy, ataxia, incoordination, headache, cranial nerve palsies. Okay, seizures also is common. GI symptoms may be evident secondary to mechanical bowel problems, constipation, ulcerations, perforation, and intestinal obstruction caused by trichobezoar formation and ingestion of indigestible materials into intestinal. Constipated bowel. Here, if you see stagnation of fecal mass is seen, and this trichobezoar can be obstructing. This is the shape of the stomach and duodenum. Okay, it can obstruct. Treatment include a combined medical and psychological approach is generally indicated for pica. The complication related to ingested item can require specific treatment, lead toxicity, example lead toxicity, iron deficiency anemia, parasitic infestation. Ingestion of hair can require medical or surgical intervention for a gastric bezoar. Removal of toxic substances from the environment, particularly the lead-based paints, is important. Nutritional education, cultural factors, psychological assessment, and behavior are important in developing an intervention strategy for this disorder. Okay, we will go to the next topic. Breath holding spells. So breath holding spell is a psychosomatic disorder seen commonly in children between 6 months to 6 years. The term breath holding spell is actually a misnomer, as these are not self-sufficient, but results from immaturity of the autonomic system. The spells can be either pallid or cyanotic type, commonly seen in developmentally normal child, occurring numerous times a day to one episode a year. Etiology: a positive family history is present in 35% of children with spells, suggesting some genetic association. Studies suggest a maturational delay in myelination of brainstem to have a possible role in etiology. Other studies reported to show altered selenium and antioxidant levels in children with breath holding spell, but none was proved. Pathogenesis: both type of spells result from reflex changes that reduce cerebral blood flow. The first type is the pallid breath holding spell, proposed to be due to parasympathetic system mediated cardiac inhibition leading to bradycardia. The primary mechanism is due to increased vagal tone leading to cerebral hypoperfusion. The secondary type of is cyanotic type, which does not occur during inspiration but results from prolonged expiratory apnea and intrapulmonary shunting. Anemia is believed to have strong association with the disorder. Regardless of the type of spell, iron deficiency anemia is known to prolong the duration of asystole during spells. Low levels of HB results in reduced oxygen carrying capacity and prolonged cerebral anoxia. Clinical features of cyanotic breath spells include, actually this episode starts between the age of 6 to 18 months. Attack frequency varies from many days to only few irregular intervals and may increase during the second year of life. Typical characteristic sequence consists of: a provocative stimulus will be there to a child. He will go into apnea and color change, that is cyanosis. Limpness, first initially pallor, then cyanosis. Limpness followed by abnormal posturing, loss of tone, and finally stuporous, may lose consciousness. So cyanotic breath holding spell is the most common type, usually occur in response to anger, leading to vigorous cry followed by apnea, rapid onset of cyanosis. May or may not be followed by loss of consciousness, abnormal posturing, or repeated generalized clonic jerks. Usually regains consciousness within a minute and resumes normal activities. Pallid breath holding spells occurs seen in about 25% of children, usually occur in response to fright and pain or an unexpected event. The child may grasp or cry, stop breathing, becomes hypotonic, and loses consciousness. Clonic movements may occur, sometimes associated with prolonged asystole. After regaining consciousness, pallid spells occasionally followed by sleep for several hours. Diagnosis depends only on good and detailed clinical history describing the entire episodes as and when it occurs. It must also include precipitating event like emotional stimuli or trauma. Presence of urinary incontinence, uprolling of eyeballs, deviation of mouth are commonly associated or seen with seizures, especially if not preceded by a cry. Okay, a complete physical examination including growth and development is essential, especially cardiovascular examination for rhythm disturbances. No imaging or specific lab investigation is necessary to make a diagnosis. Management include reassurance to parents regarding the benign nature of breath holding spell is the mainstream of treatment. During the episode, parents are requested to place the child in lateral recumbent position. Like when a child has seizures, we should always keep them in lateral recumbent position as it shortens cerebral anoxia. Iron therapy must be initiated in all children with breath holding spells with or without iron deficiency anemia. According to Cochrane review published in 2010, iron supplementation at 5 mg per kg per day of elemental iron for 16 weeks appears to reduce the frequency and severity of the spells. Atropine, 0.01 milligram per kg twice or thrice a day has been shown to be effective in palate type of breath holding spells. Use of pyracetam, which is a cognitive enhancer, at 40 milligram per kg per day is proven to be safe and effective in severe breath holding spells. Okay. The last one is the temper tantrums. Commonly seen in toddlers, tantrums are the most common between the age of 2 and 4 years. Tantrums are a child's way of showing anger and frustration. If a child doesn't like something, he may show his anger and frustration through this temper tantrums. Why do they happen? They are not. When do they happen? Is that they are not able to do what they want to do. If they are asked to do something where they do not want to do. Need to release anger or tension, is overtired, excited, or hungry. So behavior during a tantrum: child may run around, scream and yell, pound fists or feet. He may bang his head to wall or any other objects, kick or bite, hold breath, make themselves vomit, hide. All these things they can do with a temper tantrum. What to do during a tantrum? Stay calm. You should be staying calm. Do not argue with him, because they will lose all their sense. So we should not try to talk sense into them. Do not give anything that the child requires, he demands. Okay. Keep the child from getting hurt or harming others. Put the child in quite safe place until they calm down. As much as possible, ignore the temper tantrum. If you give importance and if you see his problem, he will attention fuels their desire to act out. So they will always demand that. If they hold their breath, let them. They will breathe naturally eventually, because they cannot suffocate themselves for prolonged period. After the tantrum, stay calm and loving. Wash the child's face and get them a drink of water to allow them to settle down and cool down. Remove the cause of the tantrum if possible. Give the child something quiet and easy to, without giving into their initial demand. Please, so whatever the demand, we should not give. Otherwise, these tantrums will increase if you give whatever they want. Okay. Have you given your attendance, CR?
Yes, sir.
CR?
చాట్ బాక్స్ లో పెట్టారు.
చాట్ బాక్స్ లో పెట్టారు కదా?
Ah.
Okay. Okay. Understood? Any doubts in this class? You can ask me. Have you understood regarding enuresis, breath holding spell, temper tantrum, pica? Any doubts? Any of you? Okay, shall we end the class? CR?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.